325,000 people visit in one day. Put it like that. It's not dead. Again, perceptual. We read headlines, knee-jerk reactions. Don't do that.
Like we said with the previous story and Nicola Hodgkinson raised last week, if we're looking for pipeline certainty, there's this, the JP Morgan Chase stuff as a new build, the refurb work to HSBC. I'm thinking back a couple of weeks to stories that we've looked at the Olympia development in London. Why do we need 47,000 people in what feels like a down market? It's that.
Ryan, before we actually go full on into these 3 headlines, 2 opinions, 1 takeaway, and I know I've slightly disrupted our recording pattern this week already, but is there anything else that we might be recording this week?
Well, I've forgiven you because I've roped you into hosting an AI roundtable for constructing excellence, which is going to be really, really fascinating. So, for any early birds that are the first ones that are onto this podcast and that listen to it on Wednesday, do tune in. We're going to live stream it, which is the first time that Constructing Excellence has done anything like this. So it'll be 2 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon. Peter kindly hosting, and some experts from across the sector and also from outside that are AI experts. And a couple of people in the room that have dipped a toe, just to give a representative view for what life's like on the ground. You know, I talked about the Gardner and Theobald research a little while back on kind of the haves and have-nots in sector, and I think that's one of the big things that I think that group will be good for, is that you've got some people for whom AI is their day to day, and they are experts in the space, and others who have either dabbled or haven't done very much. So, I would say to anyone that has an interest, wherever you sit on that particular spectrum, I think you'll get something out of it. So yeah, join the live stream, follow Constructing Excellence Manchester on LinkedIn. I'm sure there'll be lots of content chopped up and shared in the coming weeks. And you can say lots of nice things to Peter on the live Q&A that we'll hopefully be running as well.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. So lots of good questions, I'm sure, from the audience, and we've got some lined up as well for our esteemed panel, which is fantastic. But that's this week. You done anything last week of interest?
Oh yeah, standard sort of middle-aged dad stuff of gardening and tip runs. It was
Jealous.
it was relatively. We're back to horticulture again, by the way. AI and horticulture just seems to be this kind of like sweet spot in the middle of our Venn diagram. But I'm not going to lie, that's exactly what I was up to. How about yourself?
I actually watched my wife do some pressure washing, which I was hugely jealous of. So middle-aged jealousy coming in there. I couldn't resist. I had to go out and help as well, but I think tip run tops that, to be fair. So good on you. Shall we get on with some headlines within?
I think we better have before we lose a few more listeners. Plenty of stuff to get through this week. We've done it's usually my fault, as these things tend to be, but a bit of a twofer again on our first story, because there's been a lot of end of quarter sort of numbers in review, how's the sector performing type stories. You can't help but view a lot of this every week. We seem to be talking about this for understandable reasons, but you can't help but view these stories through the prism of what's happening in the Middle East at the minute. And to your point in kicking off the show, everything kind of points back to that. But there's a couple of bits in market that are relatively encouraging. I'll start with Mace, and Mace Consults have got their market view update out there. One of the things that I noticed in there, just given we've spoken before about following Golden Thread or REBA Plan of Works or some sort of linear view of market, we've been talking about what the consultants and the architects and so on are seeding. Validated within the Mace Consult reporting that they start by looking at 2025 orders, which across the sector up 12.6% and much, much stronger than in previous years. So all things being equal, this should be a good year for the sector. However, all things being equal includes crossing your fingers and hoping that things calm down in Iran sooner rather than later, and which is referenced at several points, both in the report itself and in the commentary around it. Again, tender price forecasts are on the up, but only by 0.5% as it stands. But again, you referenced that it's harder to predict any further out than that, because the longer that this goes on for, the more volatility is baked in at that point. And this will be absolutely no surprise to you, I'm sure, or to anyone else that's listened to us ramble over the last couple of weeks. But if you're looking at firstly, where that 12.6% has come from and where jobs are on now, it's public sector work and it's infrastructure work. I think that's where the most confidence is at the minute that
Mm.
things are going to be underwritten, that there's less private money involved. The size of the projects are so long view that people are kind of taking a bit of a wary eye of what's happening in the Middle East, but it's not the major catalyst driving decisions in the way that it will be in other markets, which we'll come on to in a little bit. So yeah, there's no massive corrections to sort of long term growth as far as that stuff goes at the minute. Just a bit of a wary eye on what's coming down the road. Um, Anything that I missed in that one, Pete, that didn't sound to you?
I think you covered it really well in that we're starting with a bit of a twofer and conflicting headlines, but then, as we always say, look beyond the headline and is it conflicting or isn't it? And you've got in specification online, Mace Consult publishing first quarterly market view on 2026, and the title that they've gone for is they're saying there's uncertainty within construction, and then in Housing Today, you've got Barratt Redrow who say what's happening in the world today is going to have limited impact on full year results. So you've almost got one which is looking at it from a negative point of view and the other that's looking at it from a positive point of view. But if you elongate both of them, essentially it's we're all right now, but then looking longer term,
Yeah.
it's a bit sketchy.
Well, I don't. If you talk about that with the Barratt Redrow one, because it's for optimists like us, and again, that is part of our brief on this, is to try and find those headlines that go beyond the doom and gloom of the last few years. That was one that jumped out as what a great headline. So this isn't me being a pessimist. This is me saying, to your point, go behind the headlines and have a look. Where they talk about full year, they've got another quarter within their quote unquote full year. So they're not looking calendar year and going,
Mm,
we're all good for 26. They're looking at it from a financial year point of view. So again, in fairness, they've had a very, very good last quarter. So including multi-unit occupancy, so not just your single house dwelling, 6.3% growth in the last quarter, as compared with the same point in the previous year. So they've done really, really well.
mm,
It doesn't look like there's going to be any adjustments to their results, as you say, which is great. They've managed to retain where they are on sort of a unit cost and everything else. So even if there have been increases in materials and so on, that's not kind of showing up in the numbers just yet. However, as I say, they've it not affecting their full year is because their full year has a much shorter runway than one might imagine on the basis of the way that information is presented. So it's positive. I don't want to take anything away from it. Again, it's not like there's been all kinds of all singing, all dancing numbers from the house building sector over the last quarter that would absolutely justify a 6.3% increase. So I think the fact that they've driven that is brilliant. But there is a point raised in there that activity is probably the result of people having secured preferential mortgage rates prior to the start of the Iran war, and that one would assume, just based on all the headlines and other sort of market impact assessments, that if that is true and that's the thing that's kind of driven that confidence and has seen those work start, that might not hold over the next quarter or beyond. Again, pending how long this goes on for and how deep the impact is, but. Yeah, I guess we should be celebrating nonetheless. That's it's still pretty good performance, I would guess, in the context of things otherwise.
yeah, going back to the Mace story, um, and there was a really good soundbite, and it's really interesting food for thought. And it made me think and then go and research. So I'll do the research first and then go back to the soundbite. And I was thinking, okay, so we've got this restriction on oil and potential limitations that brings. How would that impact construction specifically in terms of products and other areas? And for a layman like myself, I didn't realize where oil is utilized so much. And you're talking some are obvious and some aren't. So you got asphalt, plastics, insulation, steel, cement, glass, aluminium, basically anything that makes a building. And then you've got to think wider. So it's the energy you consume on a site for the building, logistics and transport, site equipment. There's loads and loads of different things that go into that. And going back to the soundbite, and this is the positive part of it, is that at the very end of the article, the quote is actually um, the need for accelerated investment in renewables, electrification, and wider energy security to improve resilience against geopolitical crises. Essentially saying if this carries on, that's what organizations will need to do, which
Mhm.
kind of should be doing anyway. That geopolitical crisis, I think, with all the best will in the world, we'll always have some sort of geopolitical crisis somewhere in the world. Whether it impacts construction or not is debatable, but spread your bets accordingly, and that healthy mixture, which includes renewables, can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think back to, and this is dangerous because it'll remind me how old I am, but I remember sort of first starting working in construction marketing sort of the better part of 2 decades ago now. And you were just coming out of the impacts of the 2008 financial crash. And prior to that, with a couple of small dips, it was pretty much plain sailing, and the economy continuing to grow at pace. Where it was the most environmentally friendly buildings and systems and everything else went into them, and then it's a very back of a fag packet sort of way of explaining it, but it felt like 2008 happened, costs were much more sharply in focus, and therefore those things, the term greenwashing came in, and it all felt
Mhm.
like it was a fringe thing that, you know, if the client wants it and if there's budget for it, then we'll think about those kinds of things. But it's not that important in principle. Um, and then fast forward, obviously we've spoken several times about it, but Reform UK and certain parts of the Conservative Party talking about net stupid zero, and the scrapping of targets, and how retrograde some of that activity is. It's completely reframed the conversation, hasn't it? This isn't for people that naturally wouldn't have an inclination towards environmental impacts and net zero and those kinds of things, just on a personal level. You've completely reframed it now, haven't you? Away from, saving the planet and care for the environment, to it being about sovereignty and security.
Mm.
And while it shouldn't need that, I think, saving the planet's a pretty a pretty worthwhile endeavor in and of itself. Um, as long as the ends are where we need to get to, then I'm fine with that. Whatever needs to happen to get us to that point is what it is. So yeah, it's what's happening in the Middle East is absolutely horrific. But if it forces us to grow up and to take these things a bit more seriously than would have been the case otherwise, then at least for the UK, there's hopefully a positive outcome there where it comes to net zero and to energy security.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely.
we will see.
But all this doesn't really mean that much if we haven't got the people to actually build things, which we do. We need those humans. Lo and behold, in this day and age, we still need humans, which brings us nicely onto our second story, which, sticking with specification online, they aren't the sponsor. It just so happens that they're reporting some good news this week, and this is all about women completing construction apprenticeships, and those women, the numbers have tripled since 2018. So in 8 years, we've tripled the number of women that are completing apprenticeships, which is fantastic. Can do more, but the numbers and figures, which I'll let you dig into a little bit because I know you get excited with those types of stats, uh, are looking really encouraging.
Yeah, completely. I think, again, I always feel like the negative one because, again, you dig deeper into the figures and start to find threads. So I promise I'm not. It's just as you say, casting a critical eye over these things
Hmm.
because I am a nerd. Um, so let's start by saying threefold increase is absolutely incredible. And legit. So these are CITB figures that they've shared. We've gone from 340 apprenticeship completions in 2018 to 910 women completing apprenticeships last year. So that is absolutely awesome. Um, where I think there's, let me flip it into a positive. Where I think there's even more potential in this is that the intake numbers haven't increased at the same rate. I think we've maybe doubled the number of women entering into apprenticeships, and then had a 300% increase in people completing, pardon me, women completing apprenticeships. So yeah, there's even more potential there. I know, I bang on about it all the time, but the more we can sell the sector to the greatest number of people possible. We know how good the sector is. We know how important it is. We know how, you know, how great careers can be in the sector, how fulfilling they can be, and ultimately the good that people do as a result of their work in sector. We've just got to make it as appealing as possible to as many people as possible. And in fairness to the CITB and to other people delivering their training, that the fact that that ratio of completions has increased and has outstripped the number of the percentage increase of people joining says that we're doing a good job from a training point of view as well. Once people are in funnel, we
Mm.
just need to get as many people as possible to come and take a look at us and to come and give this stuff a go. But yeah, I think I managed to flip that into a positive then, didn't I? But that was one thing that stuck out was that, yeah, to your point of we could do more. I think we absolutely could do more to yeah, to promote and to get people in there. If we've got a model that works and clearly seems to be working, then yeah, the next phase of this needs to be just reassuring more women that are potentially interested that there is a place for them and there is training for them.
Mm. The positive from my perspective, digging a little deeper into it, is that it very much seems like CITB has been funding training and supporting it more on a local level than a wider national level, which almost like test beds. And if we can increase that, and like you said, build that awareness, we seem to be good at once they're in, at doing that activation through the funnel and getting them working. It's that bigger brand building piece, that bigger awareness piece that it is for women, because as we know historically, it's seen as a hugely male environment, which isn't surprising in terms of the skew on numbers. But if we can get that right, the promotional part, talking as two marketers, then I think we stand a much better chance of getting more people, women plus others into the
Yeah,
industry. They say that we need 47,000 additional workers every year. I think again that number is heightened as well, and I wouldn't believe it's actually 47,000 due to technology and how we can actually deliver projects now. I'd say we could reduce that number quite dramatically. So it is achievable, and if you put the numbers, we're saying 910 against that 47,000, it doesn't seem much. But
yeah.
if you start to multiply and you get that effect going, we can quickly reduce that bigger number to something that is a lot more manageable.
But I completely agree because you're on the face of it, you look at 910 versus 47,000. You go, we're still on a hiding to nothing here, aren't we? And I accept going back to last week's episode and the Nicola Hodkinson article on how to make apprenticeships work for employers and make sure that we have more permanent employment opportunities. Because part of my head is thinking, where do those 910 go
Mhm.
when they've completed, and are there careers for them, and so on. But similar to what we were saying in the first article, that where the conversation might have changed for certain people, if the thing that didn't motivate you to be more environmentally conscious is the environment itself, it's actually about energy costs and energy security. That's cool as long as we get to a positive outcome. There's a really, really great quote in here from Deb Madden, who's the executive director of customer engagement and operations at CITB. And just to steal a part of that, across the industry, we need to establish a culture that ensures it seeks to understand and meet the needs of people of all backgrounds. We need employers to establish clear and accessible pathways for a diverse range of candidates to learn and progress, making it more attractive for them to stay in the industry and ensure all employees have a good work-life balance. I think that kind of comes back to that thing of if we really need to fill this skills gap, and it is 47,000 people per year or whatever that figure happens to be, it's not working. Just keep going back with the same message to the same people about the same thing. We have to appeal to a much broader base. People talk about in other, not just in employment, but in other things as well. About it's about the size of talent pool. I hear sports organisations talk about it from a participation point of view as well. That if you want better outcomes at this end, it all starts with being as appealing as possible and having that mass appeal. There are other sectors that are much more exclusive and turning people away and don't have the same problems that we do. And part of it's because the sector is just so appealing. And again, I know I'm stuck record somewhat on in finding the same angle on two different stories here, but I just think it's that important, Pete, that we have a really good story to tell. It's not that we need to lie or massage
Yeah.
anything. There is a model that works. It just needs to be sold to more people en masse, I believe.
And we both know it's not gonna happen overnight, and these things take
Hmm.
years to turn around. Perceptions and what if we call it the general public, what the general public think about certain industries or certain skills. It takes years, if not decades, but you need to start somewhere. And yeah, I think it does need that bigger focus on how we're seen as an entire industry, um, to change that narrative. And this goes some way in doing it. Can do more, can do better. Probably a B plus for me. This one. Um, so there's room for improvement, but it's nothing to be sniffed at, really.
Not at all. And again, I think if it proves that there's a training model that works, perfect. Let's see if that can work at scale. And to your point, it's worked in local markets. How do you nationalize that? Does that
Yeah.
give it the scale inherently built in? It's an interesting thing, actually, the local point, thinking back to stories we've covered previously on, new towns, on devolution, on
Mm,
Northern Powerhouse is something that we hear a lot about in our neck of the woods. But do you continue with that regionalized approach and sort of train people with the skills needed to deliver the
mm,
immediate needs of that local environment and so on is an interesting thought.
yeah.
But yeah, again, I still maintain you need people in the system in order to give it that scale and to give you those options. And back to the story from Nicola last week on apprenticeships, it would be a win-win for everyone if that pipeline visibility was there, if there was more security in the medium term for people entering the sector, for employers creating those apprenticeship opportunities, for people delivering training to understand the size of base of people they're likely to train and what the need might be and what the requirement might be for that sector on a local or national basis. That
Mm,
yeah, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but I feel we're getting better at that stuff. We just need to keep on with it, and yeah, let's make the sector as attractive as possible to a market where people are in the market for jobs.
yeah. Absolutely. Completely agree. On to the final story, which is in building.co.uk this week, and this is all about Canary Wharf. And the canary isn't dying; it's chirping away, apparently, which is a really positive thing to hear and see. And this whole, I'd call it an article, really, because it goes into a lot of in depth information about Canary Wharf. And this all came about really during COVID times and HSBC saying they were moving out of Canary Wharf and closing that part of their offices and moving it to near St Paul's, I think. Um, and that kind of sparked, well, Canary Wharf's dying. No one uses offices anymore, and lo and behold, that graph of working from home is starting to come back to normality and back to the base that it was. But I must admit, this news story, oh sorry, article is the winner for me this week. Not to give anything away from my takeaway, because it's the only article we've ever covered which has used the phrase "pretty chipper" in it. Um, and any article that gets "pretty chipper" and "cock a hoop" into the story gets my vote. So that's all I'm going to say to introduce this headline. Over to you for a bit more information.
So yeah, any editors listening to this, as long as you've got your Dickensian phrase book to hand, then Peter is absolutely he's in. He's completely in.
My go-to.
What this there was something that you said a little bit earlier, Pete, on perception becomes the sort of received, normal for people. It was that HSBC, and it's referenced in the article that the HSBC sort of leaving Canary Wharf and that iconic tower. That was the thing that says, "Oh, this is." And I remember, in fact, we spoke about it several months ago. There was a podcast I'd listened to on Regen, and Canary Wharf was one of maybe two or three examples that were pointed to in quite a negative way to say this is why urban regen never ever works. It's a couple of token gesture, symbolic things that are built that you can point to and go, look at all this money that it's hoovered up. There were stories of several foreign wealth funds that had taken space in either Canada Tower or the HSBC Tower that were happy to let them sit dormant because the land was gaining so much value that it kind of, as an investment vehicle, it didn't really matter all that much. And again, my dad is going to be heartbroken if anything is true in this story about regeneration, because that was his top tip for visiting London was book a hotel in Canary Wharf at the weekend because it's always dead. But apparently not. So the piece in question is Tom Venner, who's the chief development officer at Canary Wharf, and some of the underlying stats they're mind blowing actually. If
Mm,
yeah, I think back to sort of the 90s and 2000s, what we would think the heyday of Canary Wharf was. It's 1990, wasn't it? The sort of two major towers were built. But it's actually having its best years now. So what was last year was a record footfall of 72.6 million people. So again, for all this talk of it being dead, it's not doing too bad. Only 3,500 residents, but that's going to double over the next couple of years. 300 retailers. It was over 90% of space occupied by the financial services sector during the 90s, and it's so supposed heyday. They diluted that down to 55% now. So the actual makeup of the area and the people that are occupying is way more diverse. There's some massive stuff on the horizon. So the big new project being trumpeted in here is JP Morgan Chase choosing not only London but choosing that site for its new development, which is going to be absolutely gargantuan. So it's still at early stage. It's still out for bids at the minute, with a couple of, it looks like, preferred suppliers hinted at within this from an architectural point of view. But yeah, it's looking at 3 million square feet, and it will house over 12,000 employees. And because of height restrictions on flight path to London City Airport, that looks like it's going to be a 2-tower build job, which both are still going to be gargantuan. Highest levels of office leasing in a decade. HSBC returning, which is the big one that people are banging the drum about. That if them heading over towards Threadneedle Street is the harbinger of doom, and this is the end of Canary Wharf. It's the complete reverse of that. And again, they make a point in there. I'm sure you picked up on this, that there's no crowing. Like, look who came crawling back. That yeah, it's all very collegiate and very, this is just the way that things work. But what a great symbolic sort of gesture that they're on their way back. And I don't know if you saw in there the designs that are in place for the refurb work that's going to take place on the original HSBC tower, turning the top levels into leisure and hotel and everything else. It looks absolutely incredible. So yeah, again, from back from the dead, it feels like, Pete. The headlines and the coverage and everything else were, people laughing at it. We're holding sort of rock festivals there at a weekend because there's nothing else going on, trying to desperately breathe some artificial life into this space. And actually, again, pinch of salt because of who it's coming from. It's coming from the chief development officer. They have a job to do to sort of sell the place as a destination. But it worked on me, again, for a stats nerd, that there's enough in there of substance that says that this isn't just, point at a couple of things and cling on to it. It really, yeah, and maybe there's a wider conversation there about, are we now post-pandemic? Are people sort of, making more of a virtue of back to work and back to the office environment and so on? But maybe one for another day. But on the face of it, yeah, it seems like urban regeneration isn't quite done yet, is it?
We heard it from a marketing perspective, and some people going utterly crazy saying that these times are going to change the way we live and change the way we work, and everything will be completely different afterwards. And some people of notoriety within marketing were like, no, just hold your nerve, because we've seen it before, and these things, they'll have a spike and things will change for a while, but then everyone reverts to norm at some point. And even if they don't, it takes a gargantuan amount of time for things to change in the way that we as humans do things. The platforms might change, but these knee-jerk reactions to things are never good, and it's all about holding your nerve in these instances. And you mentioned the HSBC tower and the change in that, and what this whole article highlights is the fact that we might have office buildings, and even if we do, it doesn't mean that they're going to be that traditional office building. They can change. There's a lot of life sciences going on within Canary Wharf. There's a huge residential area within Canary Wharf, and that means that people need infrastructure, amenities, shops, facilities, loads of different things. And at the moment, there's around 2,000 construction workers on site. 3 major office projects going on at a capital cost of around 2 billion. So yeah, looking towards the future now and in the future, this isn't a dead space. Far from it. It's really going somewhere, and I'd be more worried about the smaller areas, the smaller towns, of which you've got things going on that are out of town.
Mhm.
those would be the worry to me, not somewhere in central London that is prime estate. Um, I think in one day, just to highlight this, in one day, they had a festival, a Winter Lights festival, of which you forget these things, you know, if it wasn't working, you bring things like this in to draw people in.
Yeah,
They had, 325,000 people visit in one day during that festival. I mean, that's not dead. Let's just
no,
put it like that. It's not dead. So again, perceptual, we read headlines, knee-jerk reaction. Don't do that.
yeah, no, I'm
Use
totally
your
with
own
you.
eyes. Use
Yeah.
your own eyes and see what's actually going on the ground.
And you know, like we said with the previous story and Nicola Hodkinson raised last week, if we're looking for pipeline certainty, if you think of there's this the JP Morgan Chase stuff as a new build, the refurb work to HSBC. I'm thinking back a couple of weeks to stories that we've looked at the Olympia development in London, data center. You know, there's so much demand that there's going to be shortage of labor and therefore contractors bringing stuff in house. All of that, assuming all of this happens within a reasonably short time scale, that's, you know, if you talk about, you know, why do we need 47,000 people, in what feels like a down market? It's that. Um, there is quite a bit. If you piece together everything that's there, you've got the NISTA database as well, in terms of what we're looking at from a national infrastructure point of view. There is a fair bit of certainty there. I accept house building, of course, that relies a lot on, public confidence and people having sort of the want to, you know, buy new property or buy first property, whatever the case may be. But yeah, in the infrastructure space, the private commercial space, and data centers and everything else, it does feel like that pipeline is there. Just needs the confidence for a lot of these things to start and get moving. So, and that's forgetting the absolutely enormous, astronomical House of Commons stuff that we spoke about a few weeks back as well. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah, a lot of work, a lot of jobs, a lot of money to go into sector from there. So, yeah, hopefully all these things knit together at a certain point, and we're in a really good spot.
absolutely. So takeaways this week, while you gather your thoughts for this one, I'm going to stick with what I was just saying before, really, and that's about Canary Wharf. And we say look beyond the headlines, but this is more about using your eyes and your ears and making your own judgments on these particular things. We can throw stats and numbers and figures at anything, and they can paint a good picture or a negative picture, but it's always look within the detail, and this is a huge story for doing that over a longer period of time, not just an instant impact kind of thing. So that would be my takeaway for this week, and I'm pretty chipper about that takeaway.
Cock a hoop yet, or are you sort of? Is it,
Fine. Well, I'm going to wait to hear yours first before I go that to that extent.
I think it was something that you said, Pete, on so with the COVID stuff and unprecedented, certainly in modern times. But if you take a broader view, you get a better sense of where we are heading to, even with a couple of bumps. And I think that's my takeaway is that the format of this show and our roles in sector kind of force us to look for these things. But it's only when having these conversations that you step back and realize that so many of these things are joined up. And actually, for a lot of the understandable negativity or pessimism or worry that exists in market, can't get away from the fact that we had another horrific month as a sector for insolvencies last month. So I'm not trying to pretend that there aren't problems and there aren't things that we need to improve. But yeah, if you step back, there's enough stuff on the horizon of such a scale that we should have a bit of confidence going forward. And I feel like I say it every couple of weeks on, you know, just ride it out. So I'll frame that differently as just try and take a broad view if you can. And I think you'll see that, yeah, there is a reasonably strong picture and pipeline there. We just need the confidence to push through and get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Right, I'm off to see if there's anything I can take for a tip run. We'll report back next week on how that went.
Good man. Cheers, Pete.